Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Pisgah Podcast.
We are your hosts, Drew, and that is the Mangler, and we're coming to you live from the end of Airstrip, reenacting a scene from the movie Radio Flyer.
Oh, this is one of those spots I can't not make a pit stop at. And it's nice because you can stop by here on either a trail ride or a gravel ride.
I don't think I could count the amount of snacks I've had here.
Well, add another to the list because you're going to need to carb up for this episode.
Dude, after the holiday break, I think I'm overcarbed.
Yeah, man, I've been snacking pretty hard, and after some long work days leading straight into holiday time, it's been a minute since I've been on the bike, unfortunately.
Yeah, and with the weather we've had this past week, it's been pretty tough to get out on those early morning rides.
It is early morning ride season thanks to our freestyle cycle that we've jumped into.
Yeah, good point. It's starting to tear the soil up a little bit, huh?
Yeah, so a lot of people aren't exactly educated on what freestyle is and how it affects trails. There's been quite a few posts on social media this week from all of our friends in the Western North Carolina area. And so, Drew, you've done a little bit of research on scientifically what freestyle is. So break it down for us.
Yeah, so the simple version is that the topsoil and top layers of mineral soil that contain any moisture freeze at night and thaw by day.
So what does this mean for mountain biking?
This creates a kind of a fluffy dirt that's no longer as packed as the trail once was, and I guess technically what they're calling the frost between the soil would be what they call a frost lens. It can be a catalyst for erosion, soil compaction, and other undesirable repercussions like ruts that once they freeze again, they become harder to repair. And according to a 1987 study by Edwards and Burney, and this is, you can reference this in the Army Corps of Engineers, the soil sediment loss is up to 90% more in freeze-thawed samples with runoff than with plain dry, non-moisture content soil.
So we'll throw a link to that in the show notes. But being a good trail steward, it is probably best to ride while either still frozen, which is those early morning rides we've been talking about, or when fully thawed and mostly dry, which can be hard to judge based on the day. So usually what I do is I look at the weather forecast for the overnight temps, and then I look at the highs for the day and the hourly breakdown of that day, which it's tough to gauge in this area, but then I also look at what direction trails face. If you have a more northerly facing slope, let's say North Slope Trail.
Yeah, and pretty much anything in Bent Creek is north facing.
Yeah, it is. You're right. And then also look at how much sunlight the trail gets. And that kind of takes some local knowledge, but you can kind of look at a topo map and see something like Lower Bennett is not going to get a lot of sun in the winter. And Lower Bennett is one of probably the hardest hit trails for freestyle because it's down in that pocket on Avery Creek. It doesn't get a lot of sun and it stays cold down there.
And I think another good rule of thumb is to just think about it as you do your activity at the end of a cycle. If you're at the end of the frozen cycle, it's still going to be fully frozen. If you're riding at the end of the thawed cycle, it's going to be at its most dry and most thawed. At the point when it really starts to disrupt the top layers of soil is at the first part when it freezes and the first part when it thaws. So
when you see like the icicles like coming out of the ground, it looks cool and it like sounds cool when you step on it or blast through it. But usually those areas, when you start seeing that, it's showing signs that freeze thaw is affecting the trail bed.
and here in Pisgah, it's always kind of wet no matter what. So we want to take care of the trails as much as possible because of that. But I think the biggest impact is when you get in on those freeze thaw cycles and you're going through the fluffy dirt more than you're going through just plain wet rainy season dirt.
Fluffy dirt does sound good, but this is the bad fluffy.
Bad fluffy.
With freestyle in mind, a lot of people have been posting about instead of riding trails, go ride a gravel loop. With our availability of the National Forest here in Western North Carolina, it opens up a lot of good gravel routes and opportunities to kind of explore some dead end roads and stuff like that. So, Drew, what is kind of your go-to gravel route?
For me, When I ride gravel, it's not something that I'm kind of doing it just to stay in shape and to stay warm and to keep pedaling. I don't want to have to get in my car and drive somewhere if I'm going to go ride gravel. And the closest place to me that I can ride my bike to would be Bent Creek. So my general gravel route would be to ride from West Asheville down Brevard Road to Bent Creek. There's a couple sketchy sections of the road, but nothing that you can't manage with just a little bit of safety. But yeah, I tend to drop in there at Rice Pinnacle Road and then head up Bent Creek Gap and do a loop on South Ridge Road. Come back if I need to add some extra credit to it. There's plenty of good options there. And if I want to make an epic out of it, I can cross over into Mills River and beyond. So that's what a gravel ride is for me.
What I like about your route is it throws in a little bit of a towny ride, so it opens up the option for other activities like some food or drink options on the way home. If you need to stop at the bike shop on the way there or on the way back, you've got some options. That's what I love about living in town. That it opens you up to some more towny style activities on the way to or the way back from a forest ride.
Yeah, absolutely. And I even have a good section of the French Broad River Greenway thrown in there too.
Oh, nice.
How about you? What do you like for a gravel ride?
I'm with you on the riding from home. The challenge about where I live is I live on the side of a mountain, about halfway up it. So I'm either dropping down and then pedaling back up, or I'm pedaling up and over Pinnacle Mountain, which has a lot of really good options for me. But honestly, most of the time, just to keep things simple, I'm not trying to throw in a steep 800-foot climb on my gravel rods most of the time. So I'm going to drive to DuPont because it's really close to me and I can get a solid lap in there with additional options. Gravel riding to me, I like the adventure of it. I like throwing in some weird mixes here and there, some dumb routes. So my basic DuPont loop is going to be parking at Guyon Farms because that's the closest and quickest parking lot I can get to. And then I'm going to head up Sky Valley Road to Pinnacle Mountain Road and then drop down Pinnacle Mountain Road. And then that takes me into like the Reason Over zone. And then from there, I can take a few different route options like Conservation Road or, Buck Forest. I can throw in some Joanna Road. Like there's lots of options out there on that side of the mountain. Lots of good adventure options too. Like I can stop and see a couple waterfalls. I can end up right back here where we're broadcasting at to reenact the scene from Radio Flyer and eat some snacks and then take a couple of different options way back to the van. So it's still hard for me to look at mountain biking as a form of exercise because that's just not how my mind works. I look at bike riding as a fun activity and I stay in shape riding so that I can ride more. And gravel riding is just different riding and me looking for adventures. That's what pushes me to go ride gravel instead of riding trails when it's freestyle or yucky out.
Yeah, I wonder if we don't kind of come off sounding a little bit snobby here because I do have friends that live outside the area that drive out here to come ride gravel bikes all day long. For us, it's just kind of something to fill the void.
We are very fortunate to live where we live. This place is awesome.
A lot of the country just doesn't have gravel roads.
Other parts of the country, you still can get out and explore some lower traffic zones and some just weird routes.
Even some urban areas have a lot of good hobo trails to ride.
When it comes to bike adventures and graveling, what is your bike rig of choice?
So for me, I spent a few years a while back racing cyclocross. So I use a cyclocross bike. I think this is kind of where the evolution of what the modern gravel bike came from. Because you got the bigger tire, you got, well, now stronger brakes, because if you don't have disc brakes, you pretty much don't have a bike. But yeah, I run a cyclocross bike. I run a file tread cyclocross style tire, the biggest ones that will fit in the frame that I have, which still probably isn't as big as what a lot of modern gravel bikes will have. And I'll get to those differences here in a minute. But it's just what I have, and I'm not like you said. I'm a mountain biker, and it's something that I use to kind of fill the gaps with. So yeah, I don't really intend on going out and buying what is commercially available as a modern gravel bike. But it's great. I love the bike. I had it built custom just for me by Rock Lobster Cycles out in Santa Cruz, California. And I love it to death. But versus an actual commercial gravel bike, the main differences would be this, is that the gravel bike is going to be made to be stable and comfortable at a higher speed than a cyclocross bike, over a longer distance than a cyclocross race would be. So you'd be able to fit wider tires in it. You're going to have a longer rear triangle and a lower bottom bracket. These are all things that kind of equal stability when you're going super fast and you hit a hairpin turn that might be corded out on a gravel road. Whereas a cyclocross bike is actually really meant to be pretty stable at relatively low speeds, no matter how bad it hurts you to be at them. If you're in a muddy grass field, you're really not going very fast, and you got some tight turns that you got to take at slow speeds. So, it's not the ideal thing, but it's also not the worst thing at all, and kind of paved the way for what you can go out and buy right now. And so tell me about what your gravel rig is like.
My bike also comes from Santa Cruz, but from the company Santa Cruz, I'm riding a Santa Cruz Highball XC, like hardtail mountain bike, essentially. It's pretty much stock right now. I wanted to have a bike that I could, if I decided I wanted to drop down a mountain bike trail, I could, and it wouldn't be that bad. I was riding a Specialized AWOL for a little bit, but I'm just not a fan of drop bars, and I wanted to have like more of a flat bar style bike, and so I just went with cross country hardtail bike, and it's been great. It might not be the fastest when it comes to riding on harder surfaces, but I'm not there for speed, I'm there for fun. Got a short dropper post on it. I've got some bags I can cover it with, do a bike packing trip if I'm so inclined. It rides well. Yeah, it's a good bike, and it's like my ride everything bike on. So it's a run with your broncs scenario for me.
That is an excellent bike. I had the aluminum version a few years ago that I set up as a single speed. And you're right, I wound up riding it more on gravel than I did actually wind up going for mountain bike rides on.
Any bike's a gravel bike if you point it down a gravel road.
Even your trail bike.
Exactly, because let's be honest, we ride our trail bikes on a lot of gravel.
Yeah, if you're going to go up Clawhammer,
You're on a gravel ride
you're on a gravel ride.
until it's trail.
Hmm.
So for this week's feature interview, I had the chance to drag Eric Porter onto the internet to do a little remote interview with him. A couple of weeks ago, he was in the area, and Daniel Sapp and I drug him out on a little bit of a Pisgah tour. We rode some stuff over in the fish hatchery area. He was kind of on a tight schedule, so we didn't get a whole lot of chance to hang out. It's like to have Eric on the show. It's a little different style interview than what we've had in the past, and I've got a couple more of these lined up. So, with that in mind, here is Eric Porter.
Thanks for having me on. My name's Eric Porter. I'm a professional mountain biker, and I've been doing this for a long time now. And I've done kind of everything from racing downhill to slope style to now I do big adventures around the world outside of this year and create videos, magazine articles, and that sort of thing. Kind of everything in the bike world.
And what, you start off like racing collegiate stuff?
Yeah, so I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky, and I was racing. I was the only kid that mountain biked in high school, and then worked in a bike shop, started racing collegiate, got to travel around and met a lot of other people through that. Started racing the Norbas and the national circuit. Tried to make it as a downhill racer, but I was too busy dirt jumping in between to be fast enough for that. Lucky for me, street riding, dirt jumping, slope style all became a big segment of mountain biking. So ended up being kind of in the right place in the right time doing cool stuff and ended up with a job doing it, filming.
Did you have much of a pro career on the race side?
No, I only made it to semi-pro. I had one fifth place finish in semi-pro, but at the time it was kind of like you knew who was going to make it. There were the guys that were just dominating semi-pro, and then they'd go straight into pro and dominate that. Be right up top pretty quick. And then there were a lot of guys that would, move up to pro maybe too quick. And it was just, this is, Sam Hill and Nathan Rennie and Chris Kovarik, and the list, the Norbas were insane then. So it was really hard to be fast enough. This was late 90s, early 2000s. Yeah, Miles Rockwell and Cedric, and tons of unreal athletes there.
You were kind of on the early wave of mountain bikers turning pro, not based on race results. What was it like trying to get your foot in the door on that movement?
Yeah, so I remember specifically going to Interbike with a binder full of photos of me grinding handrails on a mountain bike, a dirt jumper without pegs.
You were one of the first ones to do that, right?
Yeah, as far as I know, the first one, I always hate to definitively claim anything because as far as anyone knows, yeah, the first one really doing that. And a bunch of, street riding stuff and doing kind of BMX tricks on mountain bikes. And, at first on like, in skate parks and street riding. And then from there, we kind of started trying to make it specific and unique to mountain bikes. So doing, maybe a flare on a dirt quarter pipe and a spine in southern Utah or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember going around to Interbike. It must have been like 2001 or 2 with a binder of, photos of me doing this stuff that no one had done before and showing potential sponsors, showing companies, and nobody cared. Nobody knew yet. What it took for me was I ended up on the cover of Flow magazine, which was like a free ride basic and downhill magazine, kind of the first of or one of the first of its kind that was specific to kind of the free ride and downhill and more gravity oriented scene. And so when I got on the cover of that doing that trick, that's when I started getting calls and things started to work out. And then that same year, I guess it was 2003, there were a number of contests that were, skate park, and the first Crankworks was that year up in Whistler. It was called Joyride that year, and that was the first big actual mountain bike slope style as well. So within that same year, I got the cover of that magazine, and then got a few podiums at the first kind of contests in that world. And all of a sudden, I had a job because of that. And so, a big element of that was filming videos, video parts, and magazine articles too.
At that time, it was, a lot of North Shore features and stuff like that were pretty prominent in videos, and then you started coming out with dropping these, like, street and skate park sessions. It definitely took people by surprise.
Yeah, and I still feel like it never got the publicity that the North Shore stuff did. I kind of feel like it almost should have because, I mean, it obviously had a lasting impact on the sport and is a part of it now. But I always thought the cool part about it was, I grew up in the Midwest in Kentucky where there were trails, but we didn't have what they had in the North Shore or out in the real mountains. And the cool thing with street riding and skate parks is that everybody has access to something. I mean,
Yeah.
if you live on a farm in the middle of nowhere, you can build something like what we were doing. And I always thought that was really cool. It kind of gave people hope that didn't live in a mountain bike mecca already.
So eventually this led to you doing the Ray's Mountain Bike Park Odd Couple video contest.
Well, I mean, so the just the scene in general, I actually came from racing. So racing all the Norbas, I was always, Aaron Chase and Jeff Lenoski and Kyle Ebbett. Those guys were racing professionally, and Jeff was doing, was the top trials guy, national champion and everything. And so those guys were at the races every week, but then filming, racing on the weekend, which was the traditional route and how they were pro riders, but filming their own stuff on the sides. And so they took me under their wing because I was racing, but I was one of the few guys that was like, yeah, let's go hit these jumps and do this instead of training on a road
Yeah.
bike.
On the way to the race, you see like a cool skate park in town. You're like, we should go check out that later."
Oh yeah, yeah. We hit every skate park. We hit every set of dirt jumps that we could find. So we were all doing all that stuff, which again worked out for all of us really well in the long run. Yeah, Odd Couple, I ended up doing that with Steve Woodward, I was riding for Haro at the time. So Steve was my partner, and then Phil Sunbaum was pro mountain biker, and his teammate was Dennis Enerson, who was also on Haro. Those guys are guys that we looked up to and watched their video parts, and to get to go to Rays and just kind of have a weekend to go film whatever we wanted and push each other, and that was pretty incredible there. All of us in the mountain bike world that were in that contest were the biggest fans of BMX, really. And so, Taj was in there, and it was just a group of everybody's heroes that we got to ride with and do videos with.
I would really love to see them bring that back.
Yeah, I would too. I just saw some video from Ray's the other day, and I was thinking about how much I missed that place. It's a pretty incredible spot.
People on the East Coast that haven't been there definitely need to add it to their list. Hopefully for this winter, depending on how like the COVID stuff pans out. But they're open, they're operating, with the masks and everything. So depending on how things go, I like to try to get up there this winter for a raised trip and stop by the wheel mill as well.
Yeah, it's huge too. I mean, it's I would think that'd be one of the safer indoor spots to ride because a lot of indoor skate parks or whatever are pretty tight, but Ray's is, I mean, a humongous old warehouse. I think it'd be one of the safer indoor places to ride.
As your mountain bike career progressed and as your life progressed, eventually you became a dad. How did that kind of change things up on how you approached riding activities as a pro and as a dad?
I mean, I like to think that it didn't affect me too much as far as I've actually always been one to think a lot about risk management. So I feel like I've always made pretty good decisions. I haven't had too many really bad injuries throughout my career. I always overthink what I'm doing and think about what could go wrong before I drop in. So I kind of have an idea of what all the possible outcomes could be and then commit to and plan on the best outcome. So I've always had to, put a lot of thought into risk management. But that being said, my first son was born in 2009 and 2010 was my last year competing in slopestyle. And it was one of those things where you're sitting at the top of the course knowing that if I put down the best run I possibly could, which would be pretty dangerous and scary, that I might qualify for the finals. So, that's a good time to think, okay, maybe I should think about what's next. I grew up riding cross country, so it was a good time to the financial crisis hit in 2008 and then really kind of hit the bottom in 2010 or 11. And so I got dropped from Haro in 2010 because they basically slashed every budget at every company. And that's when I was signing with Diamondback. So it was an opportunity to kind of shift what my expectations were as an athlete. So I basically came up with a whole new program then, what I wanted to do, which was going bike packing, going camping and riding, and not just having a job doing crazy stuff on a bike, which is kind of what it had been, doing tricks that haven't been done before, doing them in crazy places. And just doing kind of wild stuff, which is super fun, but you can't do that forever. I was actually really missing the part of riding, which is, just going mountain biking and the adventure side of things and even riding road bikes and gravel bikes. And so when I started with Diamondback, I was able to start a program to where I was riding all the bikes and creating content to where I'll take a gravel bike and ride on a cool adventure and go fly fishing. I actually realized that that's something that connects with your average mountain biker and your average cyclist a lot more too. When you're in the world of pushing the sport, you think that's all that anybody cares about. And you step out a little bit and you're like, okay, people think it's cool, but only a small percentage really care about that. The rest of the people just want to go on a fun adventure and ride their bike and be outside. And so a lot of people really enjoy seeing content that they can imagine themselves doing.
Stuff that they can relate to.
Yeah, something they can relate to, something that they want to do and can, maybe they're not going to some of the crazier places that I'm going, but they're having an adventure that gives them the same feelings in their backyard that's totally attainable.
I think that's what a lot of people are starting to realize now, especially more established pros, that there's more than just sending the hugest trick and stuff like that, but it's showing people what's possible to do on a bike, not necessarily on the biggest senders or whatever, but stuff you can find locally, like close to home as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's fun stuff that I can, now I'm able to do some stuff with my family and my kids too, and take them on cool adventures. And people are able to relate to that as parents and as kids as well. And so it's just been kind of really fun and a new level of freedom to where you're, when you're pushing the sport, you have all this pressure to do something nobody's ever done before. And now I get to do something that nobody's ever done before because it's me doing it and it's my take on it and it's my perspective and telling that story to the people as opposed to just simply doing something that nobody's done before. It's been really cool. And like I said, a new level of freedom to what I can share with people and just realizing that they're not watching me to see something necessarily they've never seen before, but to get my take on it, which is cool.
How has being a professional mountain biker changed for you during 2020?
Going into the year, the plans were I had a trip to Africa to go follow a zebra migration on my bike and the normal stuff for me, which is kind of crazy trips around the world, along with fun stuff back home, all that went out the window. And as of March, everybody's locked down, quarantining with their family. So for me, I was really lucky to be in a place where I have a backyard full of jumps and pump track, and I have trails that I can ride from my house. So it changed a lot, as far as I've just been home for a long time. I get a lot more time with my kids, and I've basically put everything into creating content for my YouTube channel. So that's been also another awesome way to connect with consumers and fans, and again, put my own perspective on it. I'm not the first one to build backyard jumps or build a pump track or to ride with their kids, but I've got my own unique perspective on it, and it's been really cool to share that with everybody.
How are your sponsors dealing with the changing environment of 2020 and kind of what your goals were?
I think my sponsors have all been really happy with everything I've done. When it comes down to it, my job is to connect with consumers through the growth of the YouTube channel, and the amount of people that are watching all over the world has been phenomenal. So even in this year where I'm not going to events and I'm not doing as much for, say traditional mountain bike media, I'm actually connecting with more people in a more meaningful way, and have actually built my own outlet now and my own audience, as opposed to prior to this year. I had, my Instagram, which is everybody's got an Instagram, and but basically you would go on a trip and then you would have to have a ask Pink Bike to post your video, or you'd have to ask a magazine to run an article. And I still think that stuff's important, and I'm not saying I'm completely blowing that off. But what I've done is created my own outlet to where I don't have to have those other outlets to share what I'm doing and connect with the consumer. So I think it's been really good for me and for all of my partners.
How's it been on the learning aspect of doing the photo, video editing, and all that stuff yourself?
Yeah, I've been thrown into the deep end there. So I've been around it for a long time, going on trips with my friends that are professional filmers and photographers and editors that are paid to create the content from the trip. So before, I would go on a trip and I would ride and help produce the trip, and then come home, and then they would work on the video and come out with it. Now it's all me. So I'm planning the trip, and then on the trip, or even if it's riding a trail in my around here, or a video in the backyard, I'm responsible for the entire process. So filming, shooting photos, and then editing afterwards. And that's what I've been, doing all year, and staying up all night learning how to edit, learning how to use Premiere. And so it's been a huge learning process, but I love learning and I love pushing myself and growing. So it's again kind of just the same feelings of learning a new trick, just in a different format.
Well, fortunately, you've got a lot of those good friends that you've probably been able to call and bug for tech support on stuff.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of phone of friends. How do I do this or whatever? And then we're in a time now where, again, YouTube, you can learn anything you want. Basically, if you have a question of how do I do this in this editing program, or how do I change the settings on this camera to get what I want, you can just look it up on YouTube and learn. So if you're a good self learner and responsible for yourself, you can get a good education on your own.
You just wrapped up a pretty cool road trip across the country. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, we did. So the last couple weeks of October, we hadn't traveled at all since March, the family or myself. Things had kind of opened up quite a bit over the summer, and we learned a lot more about how COVID goes from one person to another and that sort of thing. So we basically came up with our own plan for how we could do a trip, get to ride some fun stuff, see some friends, and stay as safe as possible. And that was renting an RV. So we didn't go into any gas stations or restaurants. And we drove across to Bentonville first, and we rode there. And that place is absolutely incredible. You've been there as well.
I can confirm.
We've all heard about it for a while, and you get there and you're like, okay, they're all right. This is incredible. And then we visited my parents in Louisville, Kentucky, where I grew up, and rode there, shot a video there, and then headed out to Asheville to go stay with Seth from Burn Peak, Seth's Bike Hacks. Rode with you and our friend Dan as well, and yeah, had a great trip. So we spent a week in the Asheville area, which was again not enough time, but a lot of fun. And yeah, definitely need another trip back out there.
Yeah, and you had been here prior, but just for a short trip, right?
Yeah, I was out last year. Most of the time we were riding up at Seth's house because we were building a new feature and riding that, shooting a video there. But we did get to ride, I think we rode DuPont then.
Okay.
Rode some big rock slabs and
Okay, yeah, you rode like Big Rock and Cedar Rock and stuff in DuPont.
yeah, so that was super fun. Before that, I honestly haven't spent any time in the area. I remember in college we went out to a race in Solly,
Oh, okay.
which at the time that was the legendary spot. People weren't really riding, or I'm sure they were, but it wasn't what it is now. The other areas that Solly was the place that you always heard about. You got to go to Solly in North Carolina.
You could probably like if you were to go back to Solly now after riding Pisgah stuff, you'd be pretty disappointed.
I'm sure. Yeah, so I don't have enough time there, but every time I go, I say I need to spend a lot more time here.
It's one of those places, I mean, you could spend weeks here and still barely scratch the surface because there's so much backcountry stuff that people don't get to. There's so much stuff just close to Brevard that's really good, and it's hard not to ride that stuff when you come here because it's good.
Yeah.
And I always want to show people other stuff, but the close stuff is really awesome.
Yeah, I really like having those levels of trails to where you've got the busy stuff that everybody can go to and ride, and then you've got a little bit further, a little less people, a little harder, and then you can just keep on branching out more and more and riding more remote backcountry trails as your level increases or as you've ridden everything else and you want new adventures. So it's really cool the amount of trails that you guys have there.
Yeah, we're definitely very fortunate to have that. What is 2021 looking like for you?
As of right now, I'm expecting it to be the same as 2020. It's possible that there will be some events. Again, we're kind of learning more about best practices for how to keep people safe while still doing some semblance of normal life. I wouldn't be surprised if every event is canceled again next year. I'm sure we'll do a few trips and we'll really probably just stick to ourselves and small groups and kind of stay away from everybody. It'll be fun when we can get back to events and see a lot of people again, but I just have a hard time seeing that happen this soon.
Maybe another RV rental is in the cards?
Yeah, I think another RV rental would be great. I pitched a trip up to Alaska. That's where my wife's family is from, and we love going up there. So hopefully, and that would be a longer trip. So we basically, I think if you're going to travel, you might as well go somewhere for a while. So maybe we might end up in Alaska for a month this summer, which would be pretty awesome. A lot of fun trails up there, and you can get pretty remote pretty quick there.
I spent a little bit of time in Alaska, but it's been either in the really late fall or like the dead of winter,
Okay.
either in like Anchorage or Valdez area.
Yeah.
I definitely want to get back up there with a bike.
Man, it is awesome. There's fun riding all across the state in a number of different areas. I've been there a bunch already for riding trips. They're not easy. You're dealing with weather and bear spray and
You're not the top of the food chain.
you're not the top of the food chain and the weather is crazy there. If you are a fan of ski movies, you've seen that, people go up and they'll sit there for 2 weeks waiting for one clear afternoon to go shoot. I've had similar experiences on the bike where we'll sit in a tent for a week waiting for the weather to break so we can ride and shoot. And yeah, so it's the real deal up there. But I feel like everybody gets a little too comfortable in their own zone, so it's good to push yourself outside of that zone and make yourself uncomfortable. So that's creative, experiences you're not going to get elsewhere. Yeah, I think we're planning on going up with the whole family, and I'll do some stuff that's kind of bigger, harder adventures with friends up there and just myself. And then we'll also do some stuff with the kids. And I'd like to show the local riding community up there too, because there's some shredders and they're doing a ton of trail advocacy too and building a lot of new trails and trying to kind of keep up with the times as far as trail network up there.
Speaking of pushing yourself in tough environments, what would you say has been probably the hardest trip you've ever been on?
The hardest trip I've ever done was definitely Zanskar, which is in India. It's in the Himalaya. It's the far northern top up in the Kashmir area next to Pakistan and China. The plan was a 16-day point-to-point bikepacking trip, self-supported. We ended up getting 2 feet of snow as we were getting dropped off. Yeah, so it snowed for the first 2 days of the trip. We were stuck in tents. We had actually moved tents because we were afraid of overhead avalanche danger. So we pushed on. We had a food cache dropped off in a village, which was halfway through the trip. We figured we'd have 8 days to get there, re-up our food, and then finish the rest of the trip. And the goal was riding into Zanskar Valley, which is one of the most remote places in the world, a 2-day drive from the closest airport to get to where we were going.
And it's probably not a highway, it's probably a pretty rough Jeep road to get there.
Yeah, it's a miserable dirt rock road that goes over a couple 17,000-foot passes.
Ooh.
Our lowest point on the whole trip was around 12,000, I think, 12 or 13,000. So basically, waited out the storm, things went clear, and we started out with our route because we were dropped off. Our start point was 8 hours from the closest town, and we were going up a river valley, and then we would have to go over a couple of passes to get into the next zone where there were any villages. The going was just really, really slow. It was either walking your bike through mud, and this is a 150 travel mountain bike with all of our gear. So we didn't weigh the bikes because we didn't want it in our heads knowing, but they were probably 60 pounds with all of our bags and gear. And so we just pushed on, and we were moving. We had budgeted, I can't remember how much it was, but it was, say 8 or 10 miles a day, like pretty chill. We were making like a mile, 2 miles a day.
Oh, God.
We had, if there was dirt, it was peanut butter. If it was snow, you're post holing, knee deep. And we were route finding. I didn't have full coverage dark glasses. I had like a Cat 2, like a mid level riding glass that was full coverage. And I had some pretty dark casual glasses, but that don't have any side wrap. That first clear day with the snow, the sun reflected off of the snow under my glasses and sunburned my eye. So the next 3 days, I had an eye patch on, and I was riding with one eye, which you try it next time. It's hard. You lose your depth perception.
Yeah, let's say there's not much depth perception with just one eye.
Yeah. So we went in the safe season. It was just after trekking season. It was supposed to be dry, historically very dry, kind of like not that cold. So we had a good plan. That was the most snow they'd gotten in that season. I think they said in 20 years. It was, for an example, Karsten and Mary, who were on the trip with us, they went there the previous February for skiing, and there was less snow than there was when we were there from this. And, again, when we left the town to start this trip, the weather forecast was we were on the edge of a storm, and they were expecting light drizzle for a day. But again, it's one of the most remote regions in the world, so they don't have accurate weather forecasting really.
Yeah, you can't forecast for that stuff.
And yeah, so yeah, so we got 5 days in, had 3 days of food left, and we had to make the call. We basically needed to turn around. We all think that we could have made it over, but the margins for error were so small that if someone rolled an ankle halfway up that pass, there's not search and rescue.
You're just done.
Yeah, you really are self-sufficient. You can call the Indian Army for an evacuation, but then you go to court for doing that because they're not set up like they are here with search and rescue and everything. So it's a big deal. Yeah, we didn't want to be in that situation. So we pulled the plug, we turned around, we got a pickup and got dropped off around the other side where we were able to continue the trip after a 3-day drive to get into the other side where we wanted to and could ride the other end of our route, which was a little bit more in the rain shadow. So we still got a ton of amazing riding, but there were just some of the hardest days that I've ever had for sure. There was one day where we had GPS said we woke up and it was 11 degrees that morning Fahrenheit, and we had 20-degree bags. So we were, it was really, really cold.
Yeah.
And, again, that day we had a 15,000 something foot pass to go over. And this is when we were on our way back out to kind of self evacuate. It was a full day of hike-a-biking, knee deep post holing, carrying our bikes on our shoulders. We had over 5,000 vert climb that day, and I forgot how many miles, but it was one of those things where it was the hardest day I've ever had on a bike, but it was also mentally easy because you didn't have an option.
Yeah, I mean, we go
So-
that way.
Yeah, what are you gonna? No one's coming to get you. You walk out.
Wow, man, that kind of puts things in perspective when you get a flat 3 miles from the trailhead or something.
Totally. It changes your level of what's okay, what's normal, what's safe, that sort of thing. And the funny thing is I wouldn't say I made fun of people because I respect people that do these insane bike packing trips that are super uncomfortable and hard and ultralight and that sort of thing. My style of bike packing, I plan a route that's not ambitious and it's going to be a lot of fun, and I'll bring my fly rod and I'll fish along the way. I want to have time to maybe set up camp and then go for a little side loop. I like to go bike packing so that I don't have to stop riding when I want when I don't want to. Like you go on a big adventure, you ride until you're done, and then you camp, and then you do whatever you want. That's my style. Way more casual and fun.
I'm on that train with you.
Yeah, it's pretty sweet. Bike packing has kind of gotten this rap for like it's you didn't do it right if you weren't uncomfortable. Um, and so I've always been anti that thinking. With mine, I'm like, no way, I'm going out bike packing so I can have fun and just keep riding and camp and whatever, go wherever I want. Yeah, this trip I did end up on the type 2 or type 3 fun
Oh, yeah.
end of the spectrum.
I was talking to Logan from bikepacking.com a while back, and he was like, there's basically like two styles of bike packing. You're either going to be comfortable on the bike, or your bike's going to be heavy, but you're going to have a nice camp.
Yeah, and gear goes a long way too. Having really nice ultralight gear kind of gets you somewhere in the middle there.
Yeah.
And I think that the third element to that is again like how ambitious are you going to be?
Mhm.
That determines how comfortable you're going to be.
You've ridden a lot of places around the United States. How would you say Pisgah, what you've ridden here, compares to some other zones?
Pisgah is really fun. Again, I grew up in Kentucky where we had rooty, rocky trails that would get wet and slick, and there'd be down trees all the time. You had to bunny hop over. So that's already my style of riding. And I definitely miss that in Utah. We have a lot of really kind of smooth, fast trails in Park City, and you got to try a little bit harder to get to the more rugged, remote backcountry trails. The ride that we did, we climbed what, like a couple thousand feet?
Yeah, I think we climb like right at like 2,000 feet or something.
And that's one go. That's not like a Midwest ride where you got 2,000 feet over a bunch of ups and downs. We just climbed for an hour in the rain and then we ripped downhill. That's what a ride like is like here in Park City. You climb and then you go down. So it's pretty similar. It's just a lot more green and in the woods. And
Right now, where is your favorite place to ride?
oh man, I don't even. I mean, it is hard to beat Whistler for everything. They've got
I'm 100% with you, dude.
every time I get asked this question, I have a hard time coming up with. There's tons of places I love to ride, but honestly, if you have to narrow it down to one, you kind of have everything there. You have bike park, you have big jumps, you have smooth trails, you have nasty, rough, rocky trails, you have big remote backcountry alpine rides. And I mean, if I had to just say one type of riding that's my favorite, it is riding in the alpine, like up here in Utah or in Whistler or in Colorado, riding at or above tree line.
It's really awesome.
It's so special. Those trails are only open sometimes a month to 3 months a year, and so you have a short window. You got
And it takes hard
weather,
work to get up there.
takes hard work. So I think that's part of what makes it awesome is because you can't just do it every day. Like the trail itself, they're fun and they're fast and usually in pretty sweet trails. But if it was on the valley floor without kind of everything else attached to it, like the work you put in to get there and the views and all that stuff, the trails themselves aren't spectacular necessarily. It's kind of everything associated with it and the short window. As far as one place goes, it is pretty hard to beat Whistler.
I'm so bummed that I didn't get to go to Whistler this year.
This is my first year in I think 20 years that I haven't been to Whistler.
I was feeling bad because my first year was 2014, and this is my first year not going.
Yeah.
So you've got a couple on me for sure.
Yeah. At the same time, I guess we can just be grateful that we've been there at all. But yeah, you look forward to that. Like that kind of makes your year getting to ride all your favorite stuff up there and ride new stuff.
One thing I will say I love about the coastal BC area is that Alpine is around 6 to 7,000 feet of elevation versus in the Rockies in the lower mainland, it's 10 to 11,000.
That's true.
So you're not getting your ass kicked as bad when you're getting up to Alpine in coastal British Columbia.
Yeah, for sure. I've got a little bit of a head start here at, living at 7,000 feet, but it hurts to go from, 1 or 2,000 feet in North Carolina to straight to 12,000 feet in Colorado. That's not easy.
It is not. What's your involvement with your local trail organizations?
I'm actually president of Wasatch Trails Foundation, which is my local trail advocacy group for Wasatch County. We're on the backside of Park City, basically. Park City has a Mountain Trails Foundation, which is a huge group with a bigger budget and full-time paid staff and everything. So they're doing a lot on this side of the hill. It's a lot newer and smaller. So it's all volunteer. We've been working towards getting our first paid executive director. Over the last 2 years, we just finished up a grant from the state to build the first flow trails and first pump track in Wasatch County. And they also happen to be the first of their kind in a Utah state park, which is really cool because they're usually pretty, risk averse in the state parks. And the trails got doubles. I mean, they're rollable, but it's got doubles and it's meant to be a directional jump trail, a green and a blue level. We were able to build the first of their kind in Utah state parks. That's been pretty awesome. It's a lot of work, but somebody's got to do it.
And you're definitely a good advocate for it.
Yeah, for sure. And that's what I was with all the political turmoil from, especially 2016 on. You try to think of like, oh man, how can I have an impact? How can I do anything that matters? And so I started to think about that, like, what can I do that will matter and have an impact? And there's lots of things you can do to help the greater good. But I felt like the best way that I could have a real impact was to work with the local trail group and create more trails for people to ride in our community, which does help with mental health and with physical health and just makes it a better place to live.
Overall well-being.
Totally. It was the way I figured I could have the biggest impact with my time.
You have a stacked plate of stuff going on.
Yeah. Yeah, I need more sleep. But, I always think about it and I'm like, I need more free time. And then I was like, well, when I have free time, I just do something else with it too. And I figure if I look back, and you always got to look at it like, if you died tomorrow, would you wish you did anything different? I don't need more time to sit on the couch. So might as well, I just try and ride as much as I can, spend time with my family and doing the things I like to, and do a good job at work and support the family, have fun. Yeah. It is tough though. I could definitely use more time.
Couldn't we all?
Yeah.
I'm sure it would be great for you to kind of give a sponsor shout out.
Yeah, Diamondback's been my bike sponsor for the last 10 years. It's been awesome working with them. And then work with Magura for brakes and Kenda for tires, Camelback packs. POC is kind of everything. They're based out of Park City here in Utah as well. And that's clothes and glasses and helmets and pads and protection and everything. Then I've been working with Cliff Bar for a long time, and more recently, Criminelli as well, which is a local high-end salami and kind of fine meats company, which is,
Your beef jerky.
yeah, that was actually a dream come true. So I've been buying their stuff to bring on trips forever. I've been working with Patagonia as well on some really cool projects, which has been awesome. Yeah, Lezine takes care of tools and workbench and all my riding tools, water bottles, GPS, all that sort of stuff. Yeah, Ride Concepts for shoes. And then Deity, I've been running their cockpit and bar stem grips, but the T-Mac pedals are my all-time favorite flat pedals as well. But those guys have been friends for a long time as well. And then SDG saddles, I've actually worked with them since the beginning of my career. Yeah, that's the meat of it.
That's a stacked sponsor list, man. You've got some good hookups.
It is. It's really cool. I'm so lucky to be able to work with all these brands that, I actually care about, and I get along with everybody there and believe in what they do. So yeah, anyway, super cool to actually have great friendships with everybody that I ride for.
That's truly building a relationship for sure.
Yeah.
Can you think of anything else you'd like to add? I mean, we went over a lot of stuff.
With the bike boom with COVID, I feel like we have a ton of new riders. A lot of them may have no idea what they're doing. And so we just, as a mountain bike community, it's easy to get jaded and say, oh, there's a bunch of people clogging up my spot now. And we can't look at it that way, because people are coming to mountain biking because it is inclusive and fun and anyone can do it. And I would just hate to have the surfer localism vibe. I think it's really important that we welcome all the new riders to the sport and kind of show them the ropes, because there's no one else to do that. When we all got into the sport, there were people to tell us, hey, don't do that. Don't do this. Do this. This is, help out on these trail days, because the trails didn't build themselves. All that stuff. There's not like a handbook for mountain biking. There's not like a website that people are going on to, and, even bike shops, they're selling the bikes, but they're not necessarily saying, hey, yield to the uphill riders. And
You're not teaching the etiquette.
yeah, the etiquette. And so everybody to kind of pass that on in a kind, friendly way. And help these new riders also become good stewards of the sport and support the trail advocacy group so we can get more trails. And, there's going to be a certain point where trails are getting shut down because of mountain bikers not being cool to hikers or equestrians or whatever. If you've been in mountain biking for a long time, you remember that we didn't have access to a lot of spots for a long time. So all of us that have been doing it for a long time, let's welcome the new riders to the sport and show them the right way, help create a good community that is welcoming. You come from BMX, so you know a lot of BMXers are riding mountain bikers now because there's a lot of negativity in BMX.
Not going to deny that.
And it's a bummer. It's as a mountain biker showing up to dirt jump spots and skate parks, there's a while where either you were completely just weren't welcomed at all, or you had to show up and throw down to gain their respect
Yep.
to get to even, I
Hmm.
mean, and part of that's good. Like if you show up to a new spot, yeah, maybe throw some dirt first before you
Yeah.
ride because they put in a lot of work there. We want to be welcoming and kind of welcome people into the sport.
Those are great words, Eric. I really appreciate you putting that out there because it needs to be said more often. And it's cool to hear, people at your level speaking out on that issue.
I'm going to talk about it more, and I hope other people do too, because it's easy to feel the other way. That those emotions come really easy to have a spot you've ridden for a long time, and all of a sudden there's a bunch of people riding it, and that can bum you out, and maybe it makes your life more difficult, and you got to ride more remote spots, or you maybe ride at odd times to avoid people. And so I get it, like we all feel those things, but then to step back and say, okay, well, does it really matter? Can I change it? And how can we make it better?
And look at the bigger picture.
Yeah, exactly. Look at the bigger picture. So there's been talk online about don't blow up the spot, regarding geotagging out overlooks and awesome trails and awesome snow spots, even. There's a lot of new riders that say, everybody should have access to everything. I think the point they're missing is that when there's a spot geotagged on Instagram, people see that awesome spot and they all go straight to it. So there is a difference versus it being in a guidebook or having a friend show you the spot or whatever, or reading a map and kind of venturing out each time you ride instead of just finding this is the best spot, I'm going to go here because, and then you end up going there every weekend and then it changes and it isn't what it was. There's a lot of nuance to all of these discussions that can only be really had in person, passed on to the next person, because when it gets online, whatever, like just turns into a fight. You know what I mean about the spots though? Like it's a
Yeah.
tough thing. Yeah, I want everybody to see those spots, but it's a tough argument to explain to, because I get it that I think it's a whole mindset that everybody wants everything right now.
Yeah. The Amazon mindset.
Totally. I get where they're coming from, but it's good to have special places.
Yeah, for sure.
And, like geotag, yeah, for sure. If you ride Mid Mountain Trail in Park City or the Masterpiece in Bentonville or whatever, yeah, geotag that. That is a spot that everybody's supposed to know about. It's in town. I think what the discussion is more about is the more remote, secluded spots that the only way for them to stay that way is to have them shown friend to friend. All that stuff, just needs to be passed on rider to rider. It's up to us to do that.
Share with your homies, not with the internet.
Yeah, exactly. Say have those good experiences, but you don't have to, post about it and tag it.
Yeah. Well, sweet. Thanks for your time, dude. I really appreciate it. It's good seeing you on the internet. And
Yeah.
hopefully we can somewhat cross paths safely in the desert this winter or something.
Yeah, that would be awesome. I'd love to ride with you again soon.
Yeah, I really like what he had to say there about stewarding in the new generation and all the new mountain bikers that, perhaps COVID and just the popularity of the sport has given us. And we welcome this. It's good for new infrastructure. It's good for new mountain bike technology. It helps pay my bills because I work in the bike industry. But I think we can all do a little bit better of a job at kind of policing what we post on social media, not because it's bad to do so, but because, it's a limited resource currently, and if we overpopulate and overcrowd things, it's going to not help get new infrastructure.
Sure, share spots in Bent Creek, share Looking Glass Falls. Those are spots you geotag. Those are tourist destinations. But when you're deep in the backcountry, kind of keep those geotags to yourself. As far as welcoming in new riders, 100%. I was a new rider at one point. I didn't grow up mountain biking. So I was fortunate enough to be let in by an awesome group of friends, Drew, you being included. So it's not that hard. You know, I get the feelings of inclusivity. Like, this is our sport. We want to protect it, but we like it because of how awesome it is. And obviously, other people are going to feel the same. So it's easy to be helpful. Drew, for this week's weather outlook, you know, being that we did talk freeze thaw here on this episode, this next 7-day riding outlook does not look good for mountain biking, unfortunately. I'm looking at the weather for Brevard, and the next couple of days are going to be rainy, followed by some warm, sunny days. But the challenge with those warm, sunny days is in some places the lows are going to dip into below freezing, which is going to cue our friends a freeze thaw. This is going to be a gravel week. Yeah.
It's going to be a gravel week. Just be responsible about where you ride. Think about how the soil drains. Think about how the erosion works, and just have fun. But don't feel like you have to go get a lap in for the gram.
Oh, definitely not.
Let's keep it responsible.
Well, that wraps up this week's episode of the Pisgah Podcast. We thank you for listening, and we have gotten a couple of shares, and we've gotten some good reviews up on Apple Podcasts. So do us a favor, if you haven't, please share, please give us a like, and most importantly, if you would review us on Apple Podcasts, that would be awesome.
And if you ever accidentally went on a gravel ride on your trail bike while riding up Clawhammer, then go ahead and click that subscribe button.
Clawhammer is probably the most popular trail gravel ride in Pisgah.
I think so too. I think we have to look at the numbers there. It'd be interesting to check that out.
Yeah, I wonder if there's a website where